So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another battle sent to me by Winged Swordsman 44. This will likely be the first one that I actually release following my three-week trip away for work, although it's not actually the first one that I've recorded, but based on the fact that this is on a map we've actually never seen before, despite it being in the game for a little while at this point, that really does give it the edge it needs to push it to the front of the queue. This map is called Lest, and I feel like the reason we haven't seen it before is because it's going to be fiendishly difficult, honestly, for the defenders to win this in a 3v5. It reminds me a little bit of the Ardenheim Outpost, honestly, which is another battle map that we're going to be seeing somewhat soon as well, because I've got a replay on that one too. But this one, the outer layer is going to be very, very difficult for the defenders to actually defend, because this little layer here, well, thing is, it's not that little at all, it's actually massive, is going to be very difficult for them to cover, especially seeing as the attackers are already, based on the deployment zones, going to be able to get up onto the layer fairly quickly. It's not going to be impossible for the defenders by any means, but the key here, I think, is how the battle goes initially, and if it goes poorly for them, they are going to need to retreat to their final stand, which is a little bit more fortified here on this little raised platform over here around this, not really a keep as such, it's sort of a little self-contained castle really. But that's going to be vital. It's going to be three Elven factions on the defence as well against a litany of others, mostly evil attackers, but not all. So yeah, we'll see if the High Elves and their Lothlorien allies here are going to be able to hold on to this position that they have taken up. It's going to be difficult for the reasons I've already said, but it's nice to see a new map. I think this was included in one of the map packs, but like I said, we haven't seen it up till now, but now we shall get the chance to fix that. Go through the army compositions first and foremost with the attackers, starting off with Darthy Darth, who's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, always a welcome sight for any attacking force, purely because their numbers make them a real asset to any attacking army. I mean, obviously in terms of quality, the goblins are really going to struggle against elven opposition, especially in melee, but their numbers are going to be absolutely vital, I think. If the attackers can swarm over that initial layer and do so efficiently, it's going to make life next to impossible really for the defenders, and the goblins and the orcs that are on the field will be able to allow the attackers to do that. Heavy goblin halberdiers give them that anchor that they do require as well. If they are going to get bogged down in melee combat with the elves, they're not going to want to do so on a fair footing, and polearm units allow you to try and contest that a little bit. But the problem they'll have here, of course, is the fact that all three of the elven defending armies today are going to have access to pikes to a greater or lesser extent in terms of numbers and quality, but all of them are going to be easily able to deal with the heavy goblin halberds. And of course, elves are also renowned for their archers, which means that their lack of a shield value and the very low quality armour that even these slightly heavier goblins don, I should say, means that they're going to be in trouble. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. Heavy goblin infantry do have that shield, of course, they're a little bit more disposable, but they're also going to be far outclassed by the elves that they're going up against today. But this is the kind of unit which is going to be important for claiming territory on that upper layer and trying to make life difficult for the elves, because if things start to get away from the elves a little bit, if their positions start to get overrun with numbers in various different positions, then they're going to be in trouble, and that's what units like the heavy goblin infantry really do allow you to do. Heavy goblin archers, so they are going to at least try and contest the long range game, which as the attackers you do need to do, but you'd have to imagine here that the defenders, being all elven armies, are going to be just fine. I mean, one of them is Lindon, and of course they don't tend to do that well in skirmish fights down, because of their low armour values, but yeah, we'll wait and see. Heavy goblin archers are going to at least give the Misty Mountains that long range presence on the field. But the Misty Mountains, when it comes to their ranged prowess, the heavy goblin crossbows are their best option. And in a map like this, positioning is going to be interesting. The defenders could make it so that attacking crossbows are going to have a difficult time getting into a position where they can actually be used effectively. This is one of those units that the elves really do need to stop, however, because if they don't, the price is going to be a pretty swift defeat, I would imagine. Heavy goblins, crossbows, or indeed any type of crossbow have got access to really good stopping power, and they're going to be able to kill off very important elven units, regardless of their tier, quickly if the elves don't position themselves correctly. Blackback Mountain Berserkers and the better than I expected based on the tourney results at Goblin King's Bodyguard. Goblin King's Bodyguard, of course, have got that decent, they're fairly run-of-the-mill as far as the bodyguard unit goes, but they are slightly bigger in terms of unit size than many others, and that does give them an important leg up. But the Blackback Mountain Berserkers are the ones that are going to be dangerous to the elves in melee, because they are going to be very, very damaging, even against the high-quality opponents that they're facing off against today. However, they are somewhat vulnerable, both in terms of their melee defense, for the tier of unit that they are, that is, and obviously to archers. Going to be one of the first ports of call for defending archers, I would imagine, as will the White Uruk Fearmongers, because where the Heavy Goblin Halberds are a low tier unit of halberdiers, the White Uruks are a higher tier version of them. They give the Misty Mountains something akin to what Gondor have in the Fountain Guard, but you can only bring one of them, and yeah, I mean the Misty Mountains, it is going to be a dangerous unit for the elves, but if they pay attention to it, they should be able to shoot it down. The Black Uruks actually will match up against higher quality defending forces better than any of the other sort of rank and file Misty Mountains units, better melee defense, better damage. They're more expensive, of course, but you know, you're going to have plenty of money to play with as the Misty Mountains, because your mainline units are so cheap. And then over here we have some Drake Broodlings as well, which in a siege battle can either be one of the things which pushes the attackers over the edge, or it can be a complete waste. It really depends on how prepared the elven defensive lines are. Stuff like pikes and high quality damaging infantry units can kill them off pretty quickly, but if they keep moving, the elves could really learn to hate that unit. Now then, we have Winged Swordsman himself, who's playing as Mordor, got some Temple Guard, so some armour piercing arrows will be useful against the higher armour defenders, which Imladris will be providing them. They're also pretty damn good in melee. I mean, Mordor well known for having a decent selection of very high-end units, the Nazgul being among them, of course, a very small unit, but if you embed them into some of the more numerous units of Mordor, they can be very, very effective indeed. We have some upgraded Temple Executioners, which actually are the match of many elven units, especially with the armour upgrade, as you can see here. Be interesting to see how they perform. Uruk Captains have got a bit of armour piercing as well, so even they are going to have some utility, but for the most part, the elven defensive abilities are going to be the sort of thing which make life very difficult for the Uruk Captains. We've got some Olag High, timing, everything with trolls, as I say time and again. Elven units can burn them down pretty quickly if they're committed at the wrong time, but if they're committed at the right time, for instance into a Lindon pike block, they could be very, very effective indeed. We've got some Minas Morgul Chosen over here, so some heavier Orc Mordor units, as well as some Blackguard of Barad-dûr, which are going to be good for pushing through elven lines, especially seeing as elven armies tend to be smaller. We'll have to wait and see if that is effective. I can only apologise if you can hear my PC whirring away in the background. I'm still actually using my older one to record Medieval 2 battles as it stands, because I haven't actually transferred everything across onto my new one yet, and it is, by UK standards, very warm here at the moment, so the PC is struggling a little bit. I'll wait and see if I'll see if I can fix that after we've, or at least make that a little bit less obvious after I've done the composition phase. Sauron's Will, more armour piercing. We've also got some Morannon infantry and some Orc javelins, so a slightly higher tier approach here to this Mordor army, but when you're paired off with the Misty Mountains, that isn't such a problem at all. Now then, over here we have got the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum, played by Eclipse 2500, good to see him. The Dwarves falling to the dark side here, marching in step with Mordor and their ilk. Warriors of Khazad-Dum, we've got some First Legion pikes, armour-piercing pikes like this. The Dwarves are one of those factions which most certainly can match the Elves for quality in certain areas, heavy infantry certainly being one of them, so it's the sort of thing which the Elves are going to have to be on the lookout for, and First Legion pikes for me are the best unit of pikes in the game, so armour-piercing gives them a damage-dealing edge which the Karas Galadon's Guardians of Lorien cannot match, but they don't have the second hit point that they do. Several units of 2nd Legion Axe Guards are going for a little bit more armour piercing, which will pay dividends against Imladris and to a lesser extent Lothlorien, but not really against Lindon. More shock infantry as well, the Locked Morale Hammers of Gundabad taking to the field, so they won't run away, which, considering the Elves can put you under a tremendous amount of pressure when they have access to a lot of funds, such as the defenders will have here, having a Locked Morale unit at the centre of things could well prove to be very handy indeed. 4th Legion Shield Guard here and some Dwarven Miners, lots of Dwarven Miners in fact, so they're going to be here effectively being the cannon fodder for Khazad-Dum. And then some more Khazad-Dum class units as well, some warriors and another unit of pikes, so much of the budget here has been swallowed up by all the shock infantry, and interesting to see a Dwarven player not go for the route of just trying to pile in as many bodyguard tier units as possible. Eclipse has taken a different route to this. Couple of units of warriors and sentries up here as well, so more numbers heavy pounds, which I actually appreciate. It shows a bit of thinking outside the box. Then we have DF Mark, who's playing as Rhudaur. He's got some Crown Berserkers, Witcher Enslavers, and Etamor's Troll Hunters. A huge amount of their army appears to be hiding. Rhudaur Axemen, Black Worlds, and Trollshort Axe Throwers, all very vulnerable to missile fire, but also more damaging, both at range and in melee, for the Elven defenders to have to try and tangle with. We've already gone through pretty quickly the bodyguard tier units that Rhudaur have, of course, throwing projectiles very much the order of the day for Rhudaur in any situation when they're on the attack. I've already mentioned in the past how useful they are to have as an attacking force. They may have a little bit of a deficit in terms of their own defensive abilities, but when it comes to dealing damage, as long as you're willing to not just throw yourselves into the meat grinder quickly and try and use your throwing projectiles to good effect, Rhudaur can be a very difficult faction for defenders to try and deal with. Plenty of Rhudaur swordsmen, Rhudaur clansmen and Dunman spearmen as well, so they are capable of fielding good numbers, and that's exactly what Mark has done here by the looks of things. And then last but not least, we have Froggy playing as the Hobbits, another race of stunted folk who have fallen into darkness. We can only see 2 Proudfoot Protectors though, which is it's a good unit to go into the red limit on. We've already mentioned the merits of having crossbowmen when talking briefly about the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. The Proudfoot Protectors even more so, because not only are they better crossbows than the heavy goblin ones, but they're also pikes in melee, which will be handy for the reasons I've already spoken about when it comes to polearm units. But yes, the rest of the Hobbit army is of course concealed, but we can imagine Hobbitry in Arms, Farmers of Buckland, Battling Brandybucks, Longbottom Mob. All of those units are going to be on display. An Aztec style tower there, Medieval 2 assets once again in play. Now then, on to the defenders, starting off with Scouts of Entertainment. Nice to see him again. He is playing as Lindon. He's got some Noldorin units over here, including the Blade Masters and the Guards. So the Blade Masters, of course, being the bodyguards here, heavy swordsman, the Noldorin Guard. Not a bodyguard unit, but one of the finest units of standard line infantry that the game has to offer, capable of trading blows and even killing off some of the better bodyguard units on an individual basis, but not quite enough to win those battles outright, as we saw against the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Still, going to be very important for the defenders' chances here. For Lindon Marines and Mithlon Marines, Lindon of course do have access to javelins, but they're more mid-tier javelins, and it's more of an accompaniment to their pikes and higher-end elven units than it is their entire faction identity, like we already mentioned with Rhudaur. We have some Harland and Guard in there. Lindon of course do have access to very damaging archers, and like I mentioned before, they're not the best in a skirmish fight because of their almost universally low armour, not counting the Noldorin units we've already seen. But if the defenders can play their cards right in a situation like this, then they should have the upper hand both in terms of terrain and in terms of their damage. A little bit of cover, maybe not so much on a map like this. That's where the lower armour could yet come back to haunt Lindon, but we shall see. Mithlon Swordmasters are in here, in and amongst some more pikes as well, so plenty of damage dealing capabilities from the heavy swordsman, and of course the Lindon pike is going to be vital when it comes to holding the line against the superior numbers of the attackers. Glossed over it a little bit, but the Hobbits are another very high numbers attacking faction, so really it's only Khazad-Dum and to a certain extent based on the composition Mordor that are going to be more quality focused, and even then not so much Khazad-Dum because of the lack of bodyguard units. So interesting. 4 Lindon archers are here, and also the Warder's Velos Tyrian Rangers in the current version of the game. Pretty much vital for any defenders who want to be competitive in this sort of situation. We've got some Knights as well, the Horse Lords of Ulmo. If they can be used effectively, they could be a real boon for the defenders, but defensive cavalry can either be a complete waste, and a big waste if you bring Knights like that because of how expensive they are, or, you know, they really make you work for your kills when you bring a unit like that, but if you use them well, they can be a real game changer. Now then, we have Arsal Ali. Now that is a name I haven't seen in a little while either. We've been seeing that a little bit more lately, a few names starting to creep back in. Imladris, who is playing as Elder Runway Spearman, will make for a fantastic frontline unit, of course. Imladris, very well known for their quality, combining all the best of elven defensive skill with heavy armour, which the other elves to a certain extent will lack. Elder Runway Spearman is the front line, backed up by Imladris Sentries. The Imladris Sentries individually are better than the Lindon Pikes we've already seen, but you can bring less of them as Imladris, so that is a trade-off. But in a siege like this, if you can position them just so, they should be effective nonetheless. Fully upgraded Imladris Guardians. I say fully, they've only got 1 level of armour upgrade, but it will be enough to make them just that little bit more effective. Again, much like the Noldorin Guard, one of the finer examples of standard line infantry in the game. Broinen River Wards are the heavy swordsman version of that. We also have some Elder Runway Swordmasters, which are a step above. Plenty of damage dealing capabilities on all of these elven heavy swordsmen. The Elder Runway Archers are a really good heavy archer. Norotino Warriors, more of a medium archer, but for their class they are slightly better in melee than you would expect, pulling out their twin axes. More archers of Rivendell. We've got some swords of Rivendell. Elder Runway Lancers are an interesting choice. Like I said, single HP cavalry in this version of the game is very hard to use, and the Elder Runway Lancers are actually very expensive, so this could prove to be a bit of a bad choice. It's more likely to be a bad choice than the Horse Lords of Ulmo, just because the Horse Lords have got that second hit point to bail them out, with the Elder Runway Lancers don't. Better armour and value, so, and a shield, so we'll see. He's also brought some artillery, a catapult. Could be ideal in this situation as a leveller, depending on where they decide to post it up. And then both bodyguard tier units as well, some Gwaith-i-Arthand and Myrdain, without the armour upgrade, but it's not really important. The armour piercing will be very useful against certainly the Dwarven and Orcish factions that are on the field today in the Gwaith-i-Arthand. Fantastic as an anchor. And then last, but by no means least, another Elven player who's brought a unit of cavalry I see here in Bacon Soup. Riders of the Golden Wood though. Obviously they've got their Silverthorn arrows on horseback, another multiple HP cavalry unit, but between the three defenders they've each brought an expensive unit of calves. They're going to need to use them well if they hope to be victorious here. Got some Marchwards of the Wood with some poison projectiles perhaps going to be utilised. We've also got some Lorinand archers who will be able to start shooting pretty quickly. I mean, they could fortify this area of the settlement, but they're not going to get there in time before Khazad-Dum are able to get up here, so that perhaps explains why this is a sub 30k battle, because this battle is going to get underway pretty quickly because of the starting positions. Woodland Protectors, Javelins, again, another example of a unit much like the Lindon Javelins. They're more of an accompaniment to Lothlorien than any sort of faction focus like they are with Rhudaur or Harad, for example. Both high tier units of archers, the Kindred of Celeborn with their split shots and armour upgrade, Watchers of the Golden Wood with their slightly higher unit score and amount of men in the unit I should say, and their Silverthorns. Caras-Galadon's Guardians, I may have said that I prefer the 1st Legion Pikes, but that's not to take away anything from the fact that Caras-Galadon's Guardians, the only multiple HP pike unit in the game. Very, very powerful unit indeed when you're on the defence and the enemy have to march into them really. Lorinand Spears and Axes forming up a very effective front line. Then Lorinand Warriors and more Lorinand Swordmasters, so all of the heavy Lorinand units here forming up the core of the Lothlorien army. We shall see how they do when outnumbered like this. I don't think we're going to make a cut actually, because I think we're going to get underway pretty quickly. Either Lothlorien's archers will get us underway, or Khazad-Dum will when they march forward into Imladris' firing line. We shall have to wait and see, but without further ado, let the Battle of Lest begin. Under normal circumstances, I think I would say that it was probably a good thing for the defenders that a smaller army like the Dwarves were perhaps able to funnel up onto this upper layer faster, but considering the more numbers-focused approach that Eclipse has gone for, that may not actually prove to be the case. It is also rather interesting to see the split between the Orcs on one side of this siege map and everyone else that is marching alongside them today on the other. I don't believe there's going to be any sort of grace period involved just based on the fact that it is a smaller battle, but one thing that the defenders can have in their favour is the fact that Lindon are going to be able to get up here completely unopposed. I don't know how much of a defence they're going to have to lay on over here, whether it's only going to be a token effort the Hobbits put in, or whether the Hobbits are going to send their entire army around. If it's the latter, I think that would be the best thing for the attackers, because it would mean that Lindon cannot really fully come to the aid of Imladris as they try to hang on to the outer reaches of the settlement. Lothlorien are going to get their archers in position to set up a pretty nasty crossfire, but Mordor are going to be up here pretty quickly and be upon them. So they are going to need some infantry on the front line as well. Fortunately, I suppose the attackers, well, for the sake of the battle, the attackers are not simply rushing up here and trying to overwhelm before the defenders have a chance to get themselves set, otherwise this could prove to be a pretty one-sided affair. So the defenders will have a little bit of an opportunity. I guess it's a grace period by default, really. Maybe the Dwarves don't want to go up here without the support of Rhudaur just yet, and in fact Rhudaur and the Hobbits are going to go around, so it is actually going to be a bit of a slog here for Khazad-Dum, because their one lower quality army is going to have to go up against an Imladris army with a lot more in the tank. What they lose in one part of the battlefield, they will gain in the others. It will be Lothlorien and Lindon that have to go 2v1. And they'll have to go 2v1 against very large armies at that. Although Goblin Infantry as an opening gambit won't be of a great concern to the elves. Plenty of high quality units though from Mordor, as we mentioned briefly in the composition phase. Just as an aside, I don't believe there's a way up around here, around the back of the settlement. No, there isn't. There are 3 ways up. 2 ways up? 2 ways up to the final stand, and like I said, I feel like the defenders, they're going to need to know when to retreat back to that final stand if they are going to have success in this battle. But again, with a slightly smaller battle in terms of frames, that very often speaks to the defenders putting all of their eggs into the basket of front loading, which is fine, that can work out quite nicely, but Are they going to be able to here against very large armies? You can see many of the hobbits have now revealed themselves as well, with hobbitry and arms. Unsurprising, if you bandits, those javelins will be pretty good against high quality units, very efficient. Maritime berserkers, we can see all of the axemen that have revealed themselves too, all quite vulnerable perhaps to Lindon's missiles. You know, our swordsmen as well, Banderbrass archers, so the hobbits could be pretty annoying in the skirmish fight. Rhudaur spearmen forming up the almost sacrificial front line with just the one of them there, but Kindred of Celeborn. I'd be surprised to not see the Cairn Amroth Rangers somewhere from Lothlorien as well. That would give the defenders yet another tool which would be very, very destructive to the attackers. We've already seen, of course, the Wardens of Elastirion. It's not the easiest map to use Rangers on for the defenders though, because much of the battle is going to happen on one level. There's no easy angle for the Rangers to utilise. It's still biding their time and waiting for a strike from all angles all at once, which is the wise thing to do from an attacking perspective, of course. Hobbit's going to be leading the way here. It doesn't really matter which of these armies leads the way. The initial casualties against a force like Lindon is going to be quite high, but both of them have the ability to absorb that as well. Around on infantry are there. I mean, not a huge amount in the way of archers, like we mentioned with the heavy goblin archers. First out, they do have the ability to skirmish, but I would imagine they're going to go in here with more of a brute force approach against Lothlorien. The longer they stay bottled up here on the outer layers, the longer Lothlorien's archers can really start to do their thing. You really don't want to be doing that against one of the premier archer factions that the game has to offer. The Dwarves have actually retreated since the start of the battle, which is rather intriguing. Many of their units are a little bit further back. I don't quite know what they're hoping to achieve with that. They're going to be going in a set direction eventually anyway. Maybe they just want to get far enough away so they're out of range of archers, but you know, that seems a little bit extreme. A little bit overkill perhaps. Gunmen spearmen setting themselves up. I mean, there has definitely been a grace period, but there's no point making a cut at this point, and yeah. Spearmen still waiting. Small troll hunters loitering back there as well. Three Blade Masters. It's also revealed themselves. Not quite as heavily loaded on the hiding units as their woodland cousins in Mirkwood, but very similar in terms of what the faction has to offer. I mean, this is clearly where the battle is going to begin. Loren-armed archers and Marchwalls of the Wood now shooting into the approaching orcs, with Mordor leading the way. Goblin infantry actually now going back the other way. Interesting to see the Olag High coming forward first of all as well. I mean, with only a singular unit of Loren-armed spears here on the front, Mordor could overwhelm them with trolls and then supporting infantry as well. Obviously, Moran-on infantry not going to be the best at attempting to deal with Loren-armed spearmen alone, but they're far from alone. These Olag High could die off pretty quickly though. They're going to try and get to the archers in behind, but Loren-armed axemen have got decent damage. Those trolls going to fall away fairly fast. Temple executioners as well, so I like this. I like the fact that Winged Swordsman is willing to send forward some more elite units early. It's going to put Lothlorien under immediate pressure. It will mean that Lothlorien can't really use their missiles badly, which is something to be said. Meanwhile, the Elder Runway Lads is absolutely bulldozing through this unit of warriors of Khazad-Dum. So already Arsal is able to get some decent value from his cavalry unit. Obviously they are significantly more expensive than one unit warriors, so more work will need to be done, but that's a very good start. A little bit surprised actually that Clifton sent forward a unit of pikes as well. He did have one up here, so I'm surprised. Actually 2 units of these warriors though that have already taken a bit of a beating. Now down the hill they come, crashing into the warriors once again. Further back, Dunman Spearmen now. Don't want to spend too long. It looks like the cavalry did come down here and didn't get too much damage done. In fact, a few of the riders fell in the face of these militia spears, so not quite as successful from Lindon's cavalry. But as I was saying, they don't want to linger too long in full view of all these Lindon archers. Yes, the Banderbrass archers returning fire now, and that's exactly what you want to be doing against Lindon. Pressuring them in melee and then getting some damage done from afar on their lightly armoured units, but given the situation is what it is, Lindon's archers will be really fancying their chances at dealing a pretty hefty amount of damage, but you can see the Band of Brass are trying to kill them off. Cavalry continuing to cycle charge in and out, and that's basically 2 units of infantry that Eclipse is going to be losing here. Nothing else happening just yet. Meanwhile, this over here, Bacon Soup struggling a little bit more perhaps, and he's going to have to commit forward an awful lot of his units very, very quickly. You can see though the Blackguard of Rhudaur running for the hills, so that's actually a good start here for Lothlorien, because it means as long as they keep this front line well positioned and with enough men on it, the Blackguard of Rhudaur cannot undo all of their efforts in one fell swoop thanks to that, and the other unit of them is on the way forward now as well, but if they can deal with them too... I mean, this is a precarious situation for the defenders. If Lothlorien do perish here, any gains that Imladris and Lindon may be making on the outer layer will be for naught, and they'll have to retreat whether they like it or not. And this is the problem with the Drake Broodlings. They've got a lot of mass and they go right through the line. Lorna and Axeman are going to try and stop them, but if Darthy Darth can keep these guys moving, it can be a real pain to deal with. You can see javelins are trying to deal with things. The Olag High are actually still alive, so it's just a sign that they were actually used quite well here at the start. They managed to cause some havoc in behind Lothlorien's lines, as have the Drake Broodlings. Now the Blackguard of Rhudaur are pushing forward as well, so this is where the pressure is really starting to come. Snow Trolls from the Misty Mountains. Lothlorien are going to have to commit forward more units now. The Keren Amroth Rangers are there. Eldrenway Swordmasters from Imladris, Watchers of the Golden Wood, so a lot of these units now having to get involved in melee, including their bodyguard archers, which are going to be stronger than pretty much everything Mordor have on the front line, other than the Temple Executioners, but they're already very depleted from their exertions. Defeat is a distinct possibility, but a lot of these more numerous units are shaken, so it's actually a delicate situation for both sides, because the attackers could have a chain rout on their hands if their rank and file units continue to take this kind of punishment. Lornand archers can defend themselves well enough in melee. The Olag High is slowly falling away, but the upheaval they've caused in behind enemy lines well worth it. The Snow Trolls will die quicker than their Mordor brethren, but they're still doing the same kind of job here, and Lothlorien kind of regaining their balance here, but with the other unit of Blackguard of Rhudaur still pushing through. I don't know, this situation is still a little bit dodgy, and there's the Elder Enway now coming in from Imladris. This Blackguard will fall away very, very quickly as a result of these Imladris reinforcements. The Caras-Galadon's Guardians are also getting involved now. Going to be able to hold the Nazgul at arm's length. Another unit of Morannon infantry arriving on the front line as well. All quiet elsewhere by the looks of things. Khazad-Dum not eager to move in just yet with Imladris set up as they are. And then over here we do actually have a melee engagement, but it comes about more as a result actually of a Lindon counter-attack. Maybe they were baited into doing this by some form of missile unit, but 2 units of Rhudaur spears are not going to be enough to deal with the kind of quality that Noldorin units from Lindon bring to the table. So they're going to finish them off pretty quickly, but a token engagement really, and a bit of a standoff in comparison to the pandemonium which is happening over here is fairly significant. You can see actually now Lindon also sending across a unit of pikes to try and help shore up the defence as well. So this is the thing, like, reinforcements from Imladris and Lindon are finding their way over here now, so I'm a little bit surprised perhaps that the other attackers are not pushing on a little bit more. I can understand it a bit more in Khazad-Dum's case because they're alone. Khazad-Dum now also sending up another unit, and this is a chain route. I mean, this is the thing. With the reinforcements, with the morale situation being what it is, Lothlorien may be coming out of this on the up. And going too hard into one part of the battlefield could backfire for both sides. On this occasion, at least initially, it hasn't gone quite as well, I think, as the attackers would have hoped. They do have plenty of reinforcements, of course, and they are now managing to renew their efforts with a wave of dwarves and goblins. But can they keep that up for much longer? I mean, Lothlorien will have dumped pretty much all of their ammunition at this point, I would imagine. Some Imladris bodyguard units can move in should the need arise as well. Keren Amroth Rangers can scarcely not get good value for money in an engagement like this. Both, well, all actually, of Lothlorien's multiple HP units are clustered over on this side of the line. And the Minas Morgul Chosen will be struggling greatly to deal with them. As I was expecting, very bloody battle right from the onset here. What are we we got going on? Ah, it's a routing unit of Longbottom Mob. I thought maybe there was a little bit of a rethink going on, but Lindon Guard, 4 Lindon archers as well. Bandits trying to get into position, but Blackwald's on the front line. I mean, Blackwald's one of the better units Rhudaur have at attempting to deal damage to the Lothlorien Guard, but with the ranged support coming in, those are clear projectiles. Is that the... Yeah, I wouldn't really recommend using the Wardens of Lothlorien on a relatively unimportant unit like this, but perhaps the defenders seeing red and hoping to deal damage all across the battlefield in a comprehensive fashion. Riders of the Goldenwood trying to charge in, trying to plug what was becoming a little bit of a gap in the side of their line here, but they don't want to stay in melee with Blackback Mountain Berserkers if they can help it. That will not end particularly well for them. A huge mass of goblins is the thing. As I was mentioning earlier on, Misty Mountain's always a welcome sight for any attacking force because of this. Even though the attackers have already been given a bloodied nose, they can very easily reform their attack with a lot of numbers thanks to the bottomless pit of manpower that the Misty Mountains provides for you. Black Uruks are a genuinely quality unit as well, some dwarven influence on the front line, so once again the defences maybe started to creak a little bit, but as we did briefly see, the Gwaithie Arthand are now on the front line, so Imladris sending across more and more of their high quality units to help ease Lothlorien's burden. I don't think you're going to see any more of Lindon's units come over here because they can't really afford to send over too much without opening themselves up to attack. And speaking of which, yeah, we're seeing this now. That's not a good sign for Lindon, with a unit of 4th Legion here managing to circumvent the little counter-attacking front line that they pushed forward. Lindon Guard are now exposed. If any more units can get through, that could prove to be a real problem, but the Dwarves actually already shaken as a result of the arrow fire they already find themselves under, and they are behind enemy lines now without a great deal of support. Scouts able to react quickly enough as well, and engage them with a unit of Mithlon Swordmasters, so Lindon will be able to win this fight, but it's more a case of more units could follow this one unit of Shield Guard. Indeed, another unit of Spears trying to move forward as well. Hobbitry and Arms. This pair of Mithlon Pikemen and Lothlorien Guard have done very well actually on this front line. It's mostly been entry-level units they've been killing, but they've been making it look easy, as high-quality Elven units are wont to do. Mithlon Marines also utilising their javelins, doubling as very fine makeshift line infantry as well, which when you're defending in a 3v5 you're going to need all of your units to muck in melee eventually, so the fact that they're designed with this in mind will be a real boon for Lindon. Javelins doing some good damage there, but a little bit less of an organised defence over here. Lindon do need to be careful to not give too much room to the enemy. Imladris meanwhile set up nicely still, but not a great deal you'd have to say of movement over here, but that mostly comes down to the fact that Khazad-Dum have been acting as a supporting role in the other front lines. Imladris sending over more units to help Lothlorien is a sign they have at least seen that, and if they try and send forward one unit at a time, they can be picked off by the Elder Runway Lancers, so it's been a good return to the game so far for Arsar, you'd have to say. Meanwhile, defeat is a distinct possibility for the forces of evil on this front line. The Blackback Mountain Berserkers now able to push through the lines, the cavalry not able to stop them, Temple Guard also in attendance, so some very scary units indeed. Arrow fire coming across from the other side will be the sort of thing which will worry the attackers, though. They'll need to pick up the pace. This is why they've probably picked up the pace in general, to try and push through the lines, because they saw the catapult on the way forward, and 1 or 2 catapult volleys at this point would be enough to send this entire force fleeing. Heavy Goblin crossbows, their effect on the situation is going to be fairly difficult to read. They don't have the best of angles, but on most of these units, however, we'll have to wait and see on that. Harsh Wands of the Wood. These poison projectiles have certainly been playing their part as well, given the density of routing units that we've already seen over on this side of the field. Karas Galadon's Guardians and Galathian Blade Masters. I would imagine this is where the crossbows are trying to hit, and we're also seeing that it's where the Orc Javelins are going to be going as well. And Archers just in behind. Still nothing happening over here. A couple more units from Imladris now being siphoned off to try and defend over there. Meanwhile, Warns of Lothlorien firing away. A little bit more of a comprehensive assault now. That little first line of defence has now been overcome by the attackers, and it's not a fully realised defence by Lindon this. I mean, they've got javelins, they've got archers firing in, but with a little bit more pressure, you could start to see Lindon's efforts start to creak a little bit as well, which is why I'm a little bit surprised that Rhudaur and the Hobbits have not been maybe a little bit more aggressive here in the early stages. But oh well. Bandits waiting, Rhudaur's swordsmen trudging up the hill. There's Warns of Lothlorien. I mean, if they've got enough ammunition to go the distance, that will be important, but not catapults. I think they've turned around and are now trying to go after the elite units that were following them, perhaps. The Black Mountain Berserkers have been intercepted now by a unit of Elder Runway Spearmen and Imladris Guardians. Between the two of them, there might be enough, but that comes about more as a result of the Blackbacks' slightly lower defensive abilities, and that was one of the generals. I don't actually know which one it was. Was it? No, it can't be Mordor's, because that is their general. You can see the general's model, so it must be the Misty Mountains, which is a bad sign for the rest of their units that are still fighting on the front line. Such as they are, there's not that many by the looks of things, and those that are the units that aren't going to be routing easily anyway. Let's say that, there goes nearly 100 heavy goblin halberds, a sort of loss that they really don't want to be taking. Meanwhile, Kindred of Caliborn twirling their swords. Defeat is a distinct possibility. March Wardens doing their thing. Heavy goblin crossbows on their way forward. Having to get involved in melee combat, they don't have a huge amount of reinforcements left. I mean, most of what they have left are either units that have returned from routing or skirmishers that are not brilliant in melee. But they just need to keep throwing things forward here because they've sort of charted their course and now they're going to have to follow through with it. Waithy Myrdain obviously going to be very effective on this front line against the kind of units they're facing up against, even the slightly better than I expected Goblin King's bodyguard. Runway Spearmen defeat is a distinct possibility. Mattress Guardians are there, Catapult Crew. Second Legion Axe Guard on the warpath. So now we're seeing Khazad-Dum get involved on the front line as well. A little bit of help actually from Lindon, interestingly enough, but the time is now. Khazad-Dum see that I think this comes about more, well, it's going to be by design of course, but also by necessity now, because they're going to need to make their move given the waning capabilities they have on what was the Mordor Misty Mountains front line. But this is a lot of shock infantry, all of which are going to be at its most useful against these Imladris defenders. Now as well, using his cavalry still to good effect, but it's more of a stopgap until some actual infantry can get over here. Archers continuing to do their thing. Still see here though, 1st Legion Pike, 2nd Legion Axe Guard starting to mulch through what was a very thin front line that was set on by Imladris here. The Great Eagles have now revealed themselves as well, which is a bad thing certainly for the elves. Having to push their way through their own units. They are going to be able to charge in there though, do a lot of damage to the Elder Runway. I mean, it's gone quite well for Arsile up to this point, but now is where he's really going to be tested. He's done a good job of supporting his allies, but can he reorganise his defence to stop this dwarven advance? I mean, the dwarves have emptied pretty much everything they had over here into this one strike, so they could run out of steam if they can organise themselves appropriately, but we shall have to wait and see. Meanwhile, this attack over here still not in full swing really. Lindon's still holding on. Mython Swordmasters are there, more and more units are being siphoned off to try and stop the dwarven advance, but this does mean he's not going to have any easy access reinforcements over here for when the Hobbits and Rhudaur do inevitably start a bigger push. So I would actually, my prediction would be that Rhudaur and the Hobbits will actually start to make ground against Lindon. You can see now I think Imladris are going to pull back. Lothlorien Marines being left behind as the rear guard. There's not that much left of the dwarves, to be fair, but what they had, they used very, very well for Lindon Marines. Defeat is almost a certainty. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. What have we here? It is going to be an overall victory for the elves over here, however, so what Lothlorien have left they can now scrape together and return the favour for Imladris and support them a second unit of Wardens of Lothlorien. So we have 2 scouts. I mean, that's definitely the sort of thing that you want to be going into the red limit on as the defenders in a battle like this. March on to the wood retreating. Still have their catapults, so they are going to retreat here to the final stand, perhaps. Noratuno warriors trying to go after those great eagles. I mean, this could be really punishing actually for this Lindon front line, because the great eagles have got that enormous charge bonus, though they're not actually going after the front line. They're going to go after the Wardens of Lothlorien. I don't know if they still have any ammunition left, but it's not the sort of thing you can leave up to chance, I suppose. As the great eagles charging, yeah, that's enough to send the few elven defenders scrambling. And while the orcs don't have too much left, and Khazad-Dum also are a little bit stretched, it's over here where the attackers still have a decent amount of numbers to mount another assault on the final stand. Slaughter Ulmo. They could still prove to be a nuisance. 10 of them, they're shaken, interestingly enough. It's not often you see a unit of Lance Knights shaken when not under direct pressure. What are the great eagles going after? Noratuno warriors? They can take their pick, really, of what they want to attack at this stage. Still the catapult. I mean, it is a rather scattered retreat at this point. There's still 3 Nazgul left. 1 on Swordmasters in. Should be able to finish them off. Got some Wardens over here still, perhaps. Some Misty Mountins units as well. Yeah, still a few Blackbacks, so not completely spent yet, the Orcish factions, but not really going to be a fixture in this battle as it goes on. Longbottom mob on the way forwards. Hammers, Second Legion. Yeah, all of that Dwarven shock infantry really did do the business very quickly. First Legion pikes as well as an anchor. They did actually take a fair amount of damage from their exertions, but well worth it from Eclipse's point of view, certainly. And I would still certainly give the edge. I would agree with the announcer, give the edge to the attackers, purely because not a great, when I say not a great deal, there's a huge pile of corpses here, but relatively speaking, I think the attackers still have the tools necessary to get the job done. Some things that may make this a little bit more worrying is the catapult. Maybe a few more ranger volleys as well. The Great Eagles hunted down and destroyed by the Horse Lords of Ulmo. Galadon's Guardians on the way back as well, so I think we're going to see the final stand work out in much the same way as we've seen these house defences work, in the sense that when the battle gets underway it's very much just an all-in kind of situation, which is heartening to see. All sorts of chaos reigning supreme where the battles have been taking place now, little individual elements of routing units. Short axe throwers, farmers of Buckland. I mean, yeah, Proudfoot protectors are going to be a worrying unit for the attackers to still see, not only for their crossbow bolts, but just the fact that they're pikes in the late game. We've seen a lot of the defending pikes be used already. Late game pikes can always prove to be a bit of a kingmaker if it comes down to pure melee. Infantry and arms. They have got a pretty defensible position here though, and the choke points are small, but they're going to hold on to this one. They do need to do it directly. They can't go there because otherwise they could just go around the attackers. Can they use this as well, or is there a... They can. I think if there isn't those wooden fences that you can see acting as an impassable barrier, I think you can actually use this interior as a defensive point. I mean, that's a very narrow choke point. There's only one way in, so we'll see if that dawns upon the defenders at any point. Don't have really anything else that they're going to be able to retreat at this point. There's a few more units trying to make their way back now, but they're going to be cut off, I think. The odd unit of Eldarenway that has been left behind. Hobbitry and Arms taking a few hits now. Unarmed Archers. I mean, I really wouldn't be using Warden's Valostirian on such a low quality unit that isn't... I mean, you're going to kill off a fair amount of them, sure, but... you hope to rout them? I do. Maybe that's worthwhile, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think Rangers are one of the ways in which the defenders can still win this battle, so... use of their ammunition has to be perfect, really. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Essenmore's Troll Hunters on the march. Still a lot of units all the way back there as well, so a little while actually before the attackers are going to be able to stack up. Thought that was fire arrows for a second there, but no, it's just what remains of the Kindred of Celeborn still having ammunition, being called into service as a melee infantry unit early on the Lothlorien front line, but this can be to their benefit now, because it means they're going to be able to shoot down, and this is exactly the sort of situation in which the split shots are at their very best. Shooting down into units that are a little bit more widespread like this means more of their projectiles are going to hit. There may only be 9 of them, but they can still be a big difference maker in this fight moving forwards. Eldarenway Spearmen does look like they are actually going to be able to get back into defensive shape if the long bottom mob don't kill them with their mighty pebbles first. Still one Nazgul remains, being supported by these miners. He is going to be able to continue Mordor's presence on the field, as will the Blackback Mountain Berserkers here. 10 of them up against 14 Imladris Guardians. The Blackbacks will emerge from this fight the victors. Elsewhere, what do we have? Over here, Blackwald's taking hits from the archers up on the hill. Again, good choice of target. Very vulnerable to this sort of thing, high damage. You might argue that it's better to go after the Witch Roman Slavers. I would actually be tempted to disagree, because the Blackwald's easier to kill, and you need volume of kills at this point as the defenders. You need to take away the numbers edge the attackers still have. Maybe early use of the catapult here. Managing to score a glancing blow on the hammers of Gundabad, maybe going after the First Legion pikes as well. The defenders now very much dug into their final stand. Catapult shots and arrows raining down from on high. What else do we have? So routing starting to happen, so those elite units that the Orcs have left can eventually join in on the inevitable festivities at the summit of the settlement. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, like Noldorin Guard, they are going to be on the front line here defending. They are going to need to defend from the front. Noritino Warriors, this is where they should be able to earn their pay as well. Those slightly increased melee capabilities for the class of units that they are will be useful, and they will actually be very good against entry-level Rhudaur and Hobbit units, but not like that. Sending them into the meat grind like that is definitely not the way. And the Farmers of Buckland, of course, are one of the actually more dangerous Hobbit units. They look, all of the Hobbit units, outside of a few exceptions, look very much the same as one another, but Farmers of Buckland capable of dealing far more damage than many of the others in the roster. Trollshaw axe throwers firing away. This is going to be the real concern. Posting up on this hill is going to give the Proudfoot Protectors exactly the angle they need to continue to be a real menace. Yes. That would be my thoughts. Elvenway Archers, Mythlon Marines now moving in as well. That, however, Warden's Valostirian shooting down. I mean, again, most of what they're killing there are Dunman Spearmen, which I don't think it's really that worthwhile. I mean, you're going to get a lot of kills, but in terms of outright effectiveness, I'm not sure, personally. One farmer of Buckland, bravely engaging the Lindon front line. His brethren fallen. Not going to end too well for him yet, and he ends up getting skewered. One of the least surprising developments, the Godhelline, we haven't actually seen them in action, but they've clearly been involved in the altercation with the dwarves on their outer layer, because they too have found themselves heavily depleted. Still after those long bottom mob. So it's going to be round here on the back entrance. The attacks are going to be at their strongest, because this is where Rhudaur and the hobbits still fall in step with one another. Archers. What's going on over here? Is there another way up? Surely not. Oh no, there is. There is a third way up. The third way. I don't actually know if the attackers have got enough to comprehensively attack 3 directions at once. Considering the hobbits and Rhudaur seem to be joined at the hip, and they're the ones that have the manpower reserves, I don't think the dwarves are going to be able to spread themselves too thin. I don't know what the Godhelline were doing counter-attacking down here anyway, but it doesn't matter now because they are routing. Easily dealt with by the dwarves. Actually a less violent assault here on the final layer than I was expecting based on the amount of frames that are left. And it wasn't as if the defenders were on their last legs. I do still think the attackers, there is a certain inevitability. When I say that, I mean, they still have a good amount of manpower available to them. I don't think the defenders, I mean, unless the catapult gets involved fairly heavily. Lothlorien could still prove to be a difference maker, I suppose. I'm not going to say it's over yet. Look, I mean, actually the attackers are still behind by 5%, so the defenders may actually... Ooh, I mean, this is a risk I think worth taking. This medieval 2 bug with the artillery is antagonising for sure, but I think from Marcel's point of view he kind of needs to do this at this point, because otherwise it'll be too late by the time the artillery can be utilised. But very, very unfortunate there to only kill 1 unit model. Deserved a little bit more, I think. Rhudaur now sending over some units to try and help batter down the front entrance. What was that? It was like a floating thing. Did you see that? I thought that was a catapult shot then, but then I was like, where would that have come from? Warns Lothlorien now out of ammunition, so going to get on the front line. Dual wielding unit, so kind of difficult to kill in melee, but no more damaging than any other ranger. Forward comes Second Legion X-Guard again, so they're going to try and showcase their damage dealing credentials. Rhudaur swordsman on the warpath. Let's see. Most of their manpower has now been committed to a front line of some description. Hammers of Gundabad and First Legion pikes involved. I mean, there's not many Khazad-Dum's Guardians left. Clash of the Titans in terms of pikes, but it's not in a vacuum, so it's kind of hard to draw conclusions from this. I think the ELVEN support is actually more substantial as well. Drowned Protectors again trying to find that angle. And they should be able to hit at least something from the elves on the front line here, and that's one of the reasons why I still think the attackers should win this. I mean, with access to crossbows such as that, should be able to do the business. Some hits from the catapults still. An even fight on this front line now as well. I think they need to be a little bit more... I mean, the Witch Ram Slavers are moving now, but they need to be a bit quicker, I think, with the use of their elite units at this point in Rhudaur. If they don't, they could end up losing too many of their rank and file, and then the deficit that the attackers have actually found themselves in may prove to be a terminal one. Fourth Legion Shield Guard are routing. I mean, that's a bad sign as well when dwarven elements of these front lines that you're pinning your hopes on are retreating. 12 Noldorin Blade Masters is actually, in the later stages of a game like this, a pretty damn significant amount of units. Arbitrary in arms. Wavering and exhausted. Here. Solo's Proudfoot Protectors, who presumably that has been the target of these Elder Renway archers, so I mean it's worthwhile because under normal circumstances if you can't kill off an entire unit like this you're not actually doing that much in terms of their ability to deal damage over the longer period of time, but because they're pikes as well you want to be dealing with them before you have to deal with them in melee. If possible. Farmers of Buckland moving up, Witcher and Slavers, so some higher quality units now, and it's looking like this front line has been blown wide open. Is this where the attackers finally stamp their dominance on the battle? Noldorin Blade Masters coming over here to try and deal with the few blackbacks that remain, try and free up the catapult crew once more. Rhudaur Berserkers still alive, 25 of them. I think quality may be proving a factor here as the battle enters its more critical phases. Hits in on the Mithlond Marines. There will be no retreats to the central keep at this point though, because they won't be able to peel themselves away from the engagements they're already in here. The defenders, Elder Renway archers engaging with the Witcher and Slavers, catapult crew also trying to help out as well, but it says defeat is a distinct possibility, which surprises me. I mean, the Elder Renway are good in melee, but surely not that good. Witcher and Slavers will take some losses though, and it will keep them bottled up for the time being. Buy their front lines a little bit more time before being charged in the back by a unit of high-end shock units. Karos Galadon's Guardians, I think slowly but surely the defenders will be realising they don't have quite the manpower needed. Those crossbow bolts, 1 or 2 landing per volley, and that's all that is needed from an attacking point of view at this point, I think. Farmers of Buckland, there's going to be just a little bit too much. It's been very close though, this battle. If the defenders had just a little bit more left in the tank, then the attackers would be in real trouble here. Because their morale is, as we've seen already in this battle, a far more flimsy thing than the more mentally sound elven defenders. Victory is almost a certainty. There's 25 of them still remain. Those Elder Renway archers, their armour will not be helping them against those tridents that the enslavers wield. Still a few Blade Masters running around. The catapult, I think, is a bit of a turning point in this battle as well. If that had been... There wasn't really a good time for Arsal to use it, in all honesty. Unless he had it already set up over there with Lothlorien, but he had to wheel it over there, of course, and it's a slow process. There wasn't really much to be done in that regard, but there wasn't an ideal time to use it. If there was, then that is certainly the sort of thing which can be a difference maker. Not because it would have killed all of these units that still remain for the attackers, but the routing that it can cause would have been the thing which made the difference for the Rhudaur marksman. What have we here? Camels of Gundabad, Rhudaur Berserkers. Hitting these units in the back. It's the final 1,000 frames at this point. Now the attack's of course ahead by 3%, so here in the final phase of the battle they have been able to turn it around fairly substantially, but That is a little bit of a lie, because of course the attackers always had more units than the defenders. It was just a proportion they had which was lower, and in the end brute numbers was enough to overcome the elven resistance here at the back. But one small thing, I mean, based on how close this battle has been, one small thing would have been enough to send this fight in the opposite direction. Much of what is left are hobbits, a little bit more in terms of Rhudaur, Khazad-Dum also here. The Nazgul presumably are still around here somewhere. Karen Amroth Rangers are on their way across. They're going to get absolutely mown down by a volley from those Proudfoot protectors. That wasn't even a last samurai-esque final stand, that was more like a firing squad. But yes, the battle reaches its conclusion on a map that we have not seen on the channel before, and that's always a welcome sight. Proudfoot Protectors. Proving to be an important unit in the late game once again. Bearded Elf, the last one left, trying to mulch his way through as many marksmen as he can, but ends up being killed. I don't know whether that was the scythe of the hobbit behind him, or whether that was just the poking stab that the marksman there inflicted upon him, but there we go. The attackers are victorious in the end, but it was looking a little bit dicey for a while there. Things could very much have turned around. I do think special mention to Eclipse here, because he played this game very nicely. He was a good supporting factor to both of his allies' pushes, and then when the time came, he went with everything he had at Imladris, and that was the catalyst for the elves being forced to retreat, essentially. And if he had left it too much longer, Lothlorien would have been completely free to support Imladris, and there's no guarantee that that attack would have worked, and that would have been catastrophic, I think, for the attackers, especially given how close it was. That would have been the thing that made the difference, you'd have to say. The Orcs acting as cannon fodder really in this fight, because they were mostly a spent force by the time the first layer had been taken, but that was kind of by design. They were the ones that were being very aggressive from the onset, and especially with the Misty Mountains you can see how much manpower they had at their disposal. Interestingly enough, Mordor, the smallest army of all the attackers, even with Khazad-Dum on their side, but you know, maybe this would have been a better battle to be more numbers heavy as well from Winged Swordsman, because I don't know, I mean we'll see in a moment, because it was from his perspective, how much damage his elite units were necessarily able to do, but we'll see. As for the defenders, lots of kills from Lindon. I would imagine many of those came from the 2 units of Wardens of Alos Tyrion they had, given there were a few blobs in this fight that they were able to take advantage of. Their infantry must have done quite well too. I think Lothlorien did quite well, because it would have been very easy to panic in a situation like that they found themselves subjected to by the Orcish factions right from the start here. But they didn't. A little bit of backup from Imladris and Lindon, and they were able to hold their shape, and they certainly didn't lose the battle because Lothlorien crumbled from the onset, and that's to Bacon Soup's credit. And it was actually a good, I don't think it was a bad battle by Imladris either. Like I said, the catapult maybe could have been used a little bit better, but I think much of that came down to initial positioning. If you can't wheel the catapult into place quickly enough, and I mean that is a thing with Medieval 2, then it's not something that's within your control as such. It's another example, I think, of artillery almost being a little bit of RNG, not just in terms of their shots, which obviously can go wide, as we've seen in this battle as well, but also where you position it. Like, you've got no idea really, and then the attackers can also just avoid the catapult to the best of their ability, try and make life more difficult for them, which I do think they did to a certain extent by accident or by design. So yeah, that was the thing I would say, and Imladris did support their allies quite well, which is, that would have been a cardinal sin if Imladris had just stood there and watched as Lothlorien got overwhelmed, but Arsal most certainly did not do that. So I think he actually did the right things. It's just a few things here and there, which I think was more to the attackers' credit, more so than the defenders' detriment. Now then, let's see what did the damage for Mordor. I mean, the Temple Guard and Nazgul actually did manage to get a lot of kills. The Nazgul in particular, just because they were on the field for an awfully long time in a very, real melting pot of elite units as well. So it does go to show, as long as you support the Nazgul appropriately, they're going to be able to rack up a good kill count over the long haul. The Olag High were used very early, but also used very well, because they got into the back lines of Lothlorien and killing off a few more of those archers really did add up in the late game, as I'm sure you will agree. Many of the other units, though, not getting a ton of kills, so those 3 units breaking 100, the rest, a couple of them just about breaking 50, but the Blackguard of Rhudaur were not the tour de force that they can be. The Orc Javelins, that's a decent return on them, but many of the other units were dealt with comprehensively by a strong Elven front line supported by very dangerous Elven archers as well. But I don't think Winged Swordsmen will mind too much about that, because in the end everything worked out for the attackers and the elves overcome here at Lest. So yeah, big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44 for sending this battle replay in. Big thank you as well to all of the players for being a part of this battle replay. As far as what's going to be happening soon, well, my intention is that some sort of channel update will have been the video that came out before this, or maybe it was a live stream, maybe it was a video. It kind of depends really on how much time I have at the time. Saying time too quickly twice in a row there, but irregardless, that's going to be the plan. So this will be the video that comes out straight after this one. Once again, I'm kind of in a race against time to record as many videos as I can to be once again 3 weeks ahead of schedule, so that I can be sent away for work and it to not interrupt. Time will tell whether I'm going to be able to do that or not. I may fall 1 or 2 videos short. If that's the case, there may be 1 week where there's only 1 video instead of 2, but I'm not sure whether that will prove to be the case yet. I think we're going to be alright. I think we should be able to maintain the current pace just fine, but we'll wait and see. I mean, if it's just 1 week, that's not such a bad thing. This may well be the only 3-week trip that I have left with work as well, because I'm pretty certain that the next trip away I'm going to have is going to be 3 weeks too, which is good from a financial perspective, but goddamn is it a hard slog when you're 3 weeks away. But again, I would have already explained the ins and outs of what's going to be happening going into the later stages of this year and then into 2023, and also maybe a little bit about what might happen in 2024 as well, because I've been talking about this at the end of these battle replays for a little while at this point. I've mentioned it in the last couple of channel updates as well. There's a good deal of flux has been possible throughout most of the year, but I'm now 99.9% sure about what's going to be happening, and I can be sure about what's happening further in advance of what I was actually thinking as well, as I would have mentioned in the most recent channel update video. So yeah, that's all going to be coming into play as the year goes on, but until then I'm going to be doing my best to maintain the current schedule and workflow that I currently have going. So normal service for now, going into December of this year, and then 2023 we're going to be seeing a little bit more of a change up, in a good way, because it's going to be almost certainly more content, and then as we move along we'll have to wait and see. I mean, things do get a little bit murkier as we go along. A lot of it depends on not just myself, which has been the primary driving factor behind decision making regarding the channel of late, but also what happens with regards to, in particular, Reforged, but all of the submods and stuff that I cover. Basically, it's going to be there's a little bit more flux when it comes to looking further into the future, but at the very least it's very satisfying to finally have a genuinely mostly concrete idea of what's going to be happening moving further into the future. But yeah, I will have already mentioned all of this, so again, I'm kind of repeating myself here. For now, we're going to be going through the standard battle replays. I've actually got one on Minister Thiel. It's not a lore-friendly battle, but I think we will be showing that, maybe not next, but certainly soon, because it's been a while since we've seen such an iconic map. I got another care package of replays from Winged Swordsman, this one. I've also got one on the Ardenheim Outpost, one on Tol Falas, one on an encampment map, which I still can't recall the name of. There's another one which I've already recorded the intro to as well, whose name escapes me, but yeah, I've got plenty from Winged Swordsman. I've also got a couple from Silmarillion, which we'll be sprinkling in here and there from the RP series. Hopefully they're a little bit closer than the last two that I have shown, because I do want to show Silmarillion in as good a light as I possibly can, as well as Reforged. And there will, of course, at some point, although this will probably be a little bit further along than I would have liked, we will be doing the knockout tourney between the two-handed units, infantry units. That'll be the next one that we do for that. So yeah, that's going to be the plan. Big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44 once again and all the players in this battle replay. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.